Welcome in, everybody, to a little bit of a surprise Saturday afternoon edition of the Aaron Torres Sports Podcast. I'm your host, Aaron Torres. Hope everybody's doing well. Hope everybody's having a great day. Wasn't really planning on going live here on a Saturday afternoon, but I figured after back-to-back blowouts to open the college football playoff, we had to go ahead and discuss Indiana. We had to discuss SMU, and transparently, did the committee get it wrong by putting those two teams in over Alabama, Ole Miss, maybe Miami, South Carolina, etc.? We're still going to do the full Aaron Torres pod on Sunday, but wanted to do a quick reaction. We have a little bit of downtime between this and the start of the next game, so figured that we would go ahead and dive on in. Speaking of dive on in, before we dive on in, a couple quick reminders. First of all, make sure you're subscribed to the Aaron Torres Pod YouTube channel. New clips, new videos going up every single day. And that's not hyperbole. We don't usually record on Saturdays, but figured this would be a fun, interesting time to do so. So we are recording on Saturdays. Make sure that you are subscribed. Make sure that also you're subscribed on Apple, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts, all of that good stuff. Also, by the way, before we get started, do want to thank our partners, our friends. You already know, I want to go ahead and thank Collie Puffs and ColliePuffs.com. Okay, so Collie Puffs, of course, is one of our official presenting partners, one of our friends, one of our advertisers. We love working with them, and the bottom line is pretty straightforward. It's that time of year. You're at home, you're sitting on the couch, you're watching a lot of bad college football right now, and you're sitting there saying, dude, I need a snack that's healthy. I need a snack that's delicious. Well, I'm here to tell you, Collie Puffs is the way to go. Okay, so these are, first of all, Collie Puffs, a family-owned company not far from where I live. Joey, the founder, is a football fan. He's a season ticket holder. He actually supposed to maybe go to the Rams game with them next Saturday. Not going to be able to go. Anyway, that's not the point. Here is the point. The point is pretty straightforward, is that he basically was sitting around one day with his family, with his kids, saying there has to be a better way. I want to watch football. My kids need something healthy to eat. I need something healthy to eat. But we also need something that is delicious, and that is where Collie Puffs come in. They are the alternative to the crappy snack food in your grocery aisle, Fritos, Doritos, whatever. They are baked, not fried, healthy ingredients, avocado oil, no grease. But don't take my word for it. They are freaking delicious, okay? For more information, go to ColliePuffs.com. You can see it on the screen there, CAULIPUFFS.com. Also, you can get them on Amazon. So Amazon loads last-minute gifts, last-minute shopping. You can just throw some Collie Puffs in your cart. They're available on Amazon. You're buying gifts for your friends, for your loved ones, whatever. Throw some Collie Puffs in. So thank you to Collie Puffs for your support of the Aaron Torres Pod. We really appreciate you. And thank you again to Collie Puffs. With that said, it's a Saturday afternoon. We got a couple minutes here between the end of the Penn State game, Penn State SMU, and the start of Clemson, Texas. Mercifully, SMU Penn State is done. SMU season is over, so there is no more time to waste. Let's go ahead and get to the topic of the day in this quick reaction to the first two college football playoff games. And the topic of the day, it's pretty straightforward. Did the committee get it wrong? Should the committee have not put in Indiana? Should they have not put in SMU? Would Alabama and Ole Miss, or Alabama and South Carolina, or Alabama and Miami, or Miami and South Carolina, or whatever combination of teams that you believe should have been in, if they had been in, would this have been different? Let's go ahead and dive in, because these first two college football playoff games in the 12-team era let's call it spade a spade, complete duds. We don't have to get into too much of what actually happened. You do not care. The bottom line is that Indiana and Notre Dame on Friday night, I'll say this, it was awesome having the home field, home atmosphere. I was actually out to lunch with my wife, and they flipped on College Game Day about 3 hours before kickoff, having thousands of fans, touchdown Jesus. It was a great scene. Unfortunately, once the game started, it wasn't very good. Final score 27-17. That's obviously deceptive because, as we all know, Notre Dame was up 27-3 with about 4 minutes to go. Indiana scores. Indiana recovers an onside kick. Indiana scores again before an onside kick sealed the game. So that was our debut, first ever college football playoff game. Here's the issue. The second one was somehow worse because SMU Penn State just went final. The final score in that game SMU loses 38-10. It was kind of surreal to watch. I mean, that opening drive, they have the chance to score the touchdown. They go for it on fourth down. Kevin Jennings could run for the fourth down, decides to instead throw it to a receiver. It gets batted down. Then from there, we know about the 2 pick sixes, and the game was basically over before it ever really even got started. And so the sad thing about it is pretty straightforward. It is the fact that basically we got 2 duds of college football playoff games. And I think the thing that's so frustrating is we all know the second that things go sideways, everyone, this is a uniquely college football thing. Only college football fans complain about the format, complain about the playoff, complain about this, complain about that. I'll say this. Every sport has issues with its postseason, but if your favorite team gets left out of the NCAA tournament, I don't hear anybody saying, well, we need to expand the playoff. Well, we need to blow it up. Well, we need to eliminate this. No. And it's the same with the NFL, and it's the same with every other sport. Yet college football, it wasn't even half of the Notre Dame-Indiana game, and I see the typical SEC honks doing the whole, well, this is who Indiana actually played and should they have been in? By the way, Lane Kiffin, dude, shut up. Stop tweeting. You're embarrassing yourself. But I think the broader question, it is pretty straightforward. I want to get to some of your comments in the comment section. Make sure you leave comments in the comment section, and I will get to them as we're live here with a pretty sizable, nice little audience here on a Saturday afternoon. So yeah, hold on one sec. Let's see here. All right, so let's go ahead and continue the conversation. And so the question becomes, did the committee get it wrong? Should they have put in Indiana? Should they have put in SMU? Should they put in Bama, South Carolina, whatever? Let's go ahead and dive in. But to me, I do think that ultimately the bigger issue with this, let's dive in. And what I would say pretty straightforward is this, is that in my opinion, okay, I think we're actually having completely wrong conversations, but where the issues actually come in. And we're going to dive into all this. We're going to get to your questions. By the way, just dropped a link to the podcast. Do me a favor, subscribe, leave a 5-star rating and review, download a bunch of episodes, help your boy Torres out. Anyway, let's go ahead and dive in, because to me, where this all starts, I'll be transparent. You know where it actually all starts? It starts a week before the bracket actually came out, okay? And I still go back to what happened that second to last bracket reveal. Remember, this was heading into the conference championships. And I will say part of this was the Lane Kiffin comment that teams don't want to make their conference championship games, because if you make your conference championship game, then guess what happens? If you lose, you could be punished. We're worried. And so I think the committee heard that noise, and there were 2 things they did that were strategically, in my opinion, very wrong. And we talked about it then. They basically said that no one that played in their conference championship game would be punished for losing the conference championship game. They also said, by the way, there was nothing that a team that wasn't in the conference championship game could do to enhance their status if they were not playing. Those were 2 colossal mistakes, and those were 2 circumstances that led directly to what has happened over the last couple days, because I said it at the time. Get in the comment section. You can argue with me if you want. But when SMU got in, they weren't the only team that was not punished for making their conference championship game and losing. Texas, I've said it time and time again. Texas, 0 wins over top 25 teams. There is nothing on Texas's resume that says they should be a team that is the top rated at-large team in this playoff. There is nothing that says that they should be the team that gets the 5 seed. There is nothing on that resume that says it. By the way, Penn State lost in the Big Ten championship game. They were the 2nd highest ranked non-champion. They get the 2nd at-large bid. SMU gets in. By the way, it's worth noting, it doesn't really matter for the playoff, but Iowa State, UNLV, which lost the Big 12 and also Mountain West Conference, they weren't punished either. So if you're going to say that SMU should not have been in this postseason, in this 12 team, then what you're also saying is really that Texas doesn't really have an argument either, because Texas had no resume that actually showed that they're worthy of an at-large bid. Their best win was against Texas A&M. Texas A&M did not finish the season ranked. I put up the stat. Let me see if I can find it really quick. Here is who Texas actually beat throughout the regular season this year. They beat the 6th ranked team in the SEC, that's A&M. They beat the 10th, 11th, 12th, 13th, 15th, and 16th ranked teams in the SEC. They did not beat any of the other top 5 teams. They did not beat the 7th, 8th, or 9th ranked teams. And so the issue was, first of all, the committee basically said there is nothing that you can do to hurt yourself in conference. Once they did that, SMU had to be in. Beyond that, let me also say this. The other issue was they said nothing that you could do. No teams that weren't playing could help their resume in the conference championship weekend. Well, here's the issue with that. Some resumes did improve for teams that didn't play. Remember, South Carolina was on the bubble. South Carolina beat Clemson a week before Clemson beat SMU. That should matter. That should count. I'll go back to what I said the day after the bracket came out. I argued, and I believe to my core, that the team that got screwed the most was South Carolina, because South Carolina was playing the best football down the stretch, whatever. And oh, by the way, unlike Bama and South Carolina, unlike Bama and Ole Miss, they had no bad losses. So to me, the issue was what the committee decided 2 weeks before the bracket came out and what it leads to. And I think the bigger issue, because I'm not just going to blame the committee, I'm going to blame the powers that be in college football. Because what I will say is you can sit here today and say Alabama definitively would have played better than SMU or definitively would have played better than Indiana. There's actually nothing on Alabama's, there's nothing that Alabama has done that we can sit here and say that they definitively would have played better. This is a team that went 1-3 in SEC road games, okay? So don't tell me that Alabama would have definitively been better against Penn State or Notre Dame when they lost at not just Tennessee, because Tennessee's a good team, when they lost at Vandy, when they lost at Oklahoma. You cannot tell me that. By the way, it's worth noting, Penn State and Notre Dame both have top 10 defenses nationally. Here is what Alabama did in its only game against the top 10 defense this year, Tennessee. They averaged 5.3 yards per completion, 2.2 yards per carry, and had 0 second half points. So you cannot tell me that Alabama would have definitively done better. Ole Miss was plenty talented. Guess what? They lost as a 21-point home favorite against Kentucky. They lost as a 10-point road favorite against Florida. Now, you can sit there and say Florida was playing really well down the stretch. They were. I don't want to diminish Billy Napier because I gave him credit down the stretch. But you cannot tell me that those teams would have gotten in and done definitively better. And so to me, what I actually think is the bigger issue is a couple things. Is I believe in my heart of hearts, this might sound crazy, I believe that basically we got the number wrong with 12. And if you've ever listened to this show, if you listen to this show before all of the, I was the guy, and you can find the tweets, I've been arguing the last 3 or 4 years, why are we expanding this playoff? If we're expanding the playoff, most years there's basically 2 to 3 teams that are good enough to win it. Last year was the rare year where there were 4 conference champions that were all great, and I think if the playoff could have shaken out a different way, you could have seen multiple teams winning that championship. Most years you get 2 to 3 great teams. And so what I said was, if you're expanding the playoff beyond 12, beyond 4, all you're doing is bringing in inherently flawed teams. You can argue SMU didn't belong. You can argue Indiana didn't belong. You can argue that Alabama or whoever would have been, but they're all inherently flawed. South Carolina, as much as I like them down the stretch, they did lose 3 times, including to 3 ranked teams when they played them. 3 of the best teams on their schedule they lost to, okay? That's indisputable. I think they were playing well down the stretch, but indisputably, they have warts on their resume. Indiana had warts on its resume. SMU had bad spots on its resume, basically no great wins. By the way, so did Texas. So did, Penn State's best win coming into this weekend was Illinois. So everybody had problems. Everybody had issues. And I'll say this, I think going to 12, listen, we're here. We're not going back. I'm not complaining about being at 12. But what I will tell you is we were always going to get inherently flawed teams with 12 teams in a playoff. There is never a year where there are 12 teams that are good enough to win a national championship. There's never a year where there are 12 great teams, even if they can't win a championship. And so once you bring in more, it leads to flawed teams, and you got to pick. It's like going to the bargain basement shop. Like every piece of clothing on the rack at Nordstrom that's 50% off. There's something wrong with it. It's too small. There's a stain. The stripes are crooked. Whatever. And that's what you get once you get past 5, 6, 7, 8 teams in college football and in this college football playoff. And so do I think the committee got it wrong? No, because based on the criteria that they set up, these were the teams that they had to pick. And even if Alabama and South Carolina got in, or Alabama and Ole Miss got in, or Ole Miss and Miami got in, it doesn't mean that there wouldn't have been other issues had they got in. And there's no guarantee. I'm sorry. I watched Alabama. I watched Alabama against Oklahoma. I watched Alabama against Tennessee. They could not move the ball in most of their games second half of the year. Now, the LSU game, when Brian Kelly apparently didn't realize that Jalen Milroe could run really fast, even though he scored 4 touchdowns a year ago and did the same thing this year, that was the one good game Alabama was dominant in the second half of the year. They were not that good. They were flawed. And so I'm sorry, but I don't feel bad that we left out a flawed Alabama team, no different than I wouldn't have felt bad if we left out a flawed SMU team. And don't tell me that Alabama definitively would have played better. And so to me, I've been chewing on this a lot. First of all, the number one thing that really screwed everything up is expanded conferences. And I think this is something that smart college football people, we've been talking about it. I've seen Brandon Walker from Barstool, who I think does an awesome job. I think he understands college football, understands the problems with college football, and articulates them in a really really funny way. He's one of my favorite Barstool personalities. The biggest issue that college football has, these expanded conferences screwed everything up. Because I was thinking about this. Think about a world where there is no conference expansion, where Greg Sankey doesn't get greedy and bring in Texas and Oklahoma, and then, of course, the dominoes fall from there in the Big Ten. Well, guess what happens? You have Oregon as the Pac-12 champ, number 1 seed. You then have Georgia as the SEC champ. You have Texas as the Big 12 champ, and you have probably Penn State, or maybe Indiana, I guess, as the you have Penn State as the Big 10 champ. And so all of a sudden, that looks like a pretty clean top 4. But expansion and realignment screwed up a lot of things. And then I think what also it screws up is that the schedules are so imbalanced. I can criticize Alabama, but there's no doubt they played a much tougher schedule than Texas. It's not hyperbole to say that I think if Texas, Ole Miss, maybe not Ole Miss, because Ole Miss lost to 2 teams that Texas beat, but if Texas played South Carolina's schedule and South Carolina played Texas's schedule, I think they'd probably have the same records. I think Texas would be about a 9-3 team, and I think South Carolina had the potential to be like a 10-2, 11-1 team, and they're probably in the playoff. So what has really screwed things up is these expanded conferences have led to such imbalance in these leagues. Think about the Big Ten. Indiana didn't play Oregon, Penn State, or they did play Ohio State. They didn't play Oregon or Penn State this year. That matters. By the way, Texas, again, didn't play Alabama, Tennessee, LSU, Missouri, Ole Miss this year. So that's what screwed it up. And so I'll be honest, and I want to get to some of your questions in a second. Make sure you subscribe. Make sure you're following. Make sure, of course, you're buying some Cauley Puffs. Do your boy Torres a favor there. They're one of our favorite partners. But I bring it up because that is what actually screwed everything up, and that is actually the issue. And I'm just going to say this, and it's going to be unpopular, and I'm going to get criticized, and people are going to yell at me, and it is what it is, and it's going to be whatever, and we'll get to some of your questions in just a second, okay? But at the same time, what I will also tell you is that when I look at college football, here's the thing. You know what I realized watching these games? The 4-team playoff under the previous format was actually the right format, okay? And I know what everyone's going to say, Torres, you're crazy, it's revisionist history. No, because let me explain. Because when we had a 4-team playoff, what I don't think people fully understand or fully understood at the time, it wasn't just that we had 4 teams in the playoff. We had conference championship games basically serving as an additional round of the playoffs. And so what ends up happening is the conference championship games matter, because if you don't win the conference championship, you can't compete for a national championship. And so what we've done now is completely devalue the conference championship games mean nothing going forward, because again, Texas, SMU, Penn State lose, they weren't punished at all. Same with Iowa State and UNLV. And so you go back to last year, think about how great conference championship weekend was, and then the college football playoff was. People can say it's revisionist history. It's not revisionist history, because you have to factor in that in the 4-team playoff era, the conference championship games basically served as elimination games, okay? And so you go back to last year, the Pac-12 championship game, Washington, Oregon, was a de facto playoff game. It was awesome. Washington wins and advances to play Texas. Oregon loses and goes home. Great game. Alabama and Georgia. I'm sorry that Georgia lost, but they lost the game. Alabama wins a de facto playoff and advances. By the way, rivalry weekend, Michigan, Ohio State. Michigan beats Ohio State. They go to the Big Ten championship game. They go to the college football playoff. Ohio State is left at home. And so I'm sorry. But I think all we're doing is just bringing in, more inherently flawed teams into this thing. And we're acting like there still aren't 2 to 3 to 4 teams that can win it. And so that to me is the take. It's not SMU, Indiana. It's the fact that whenever you expand any playoff, inherently you're going to be bringing in worse teams and the quality of the product is going to go down. That's why college basketball fans don't want to expand the NCAA tournament. It's perfect the way that it is. It's why when we added the extra wild card in the NFL, there's always that one team that's just mediocre and kind of sucks. And you're kind of like, why are they here? I don't follow baseball enough to know the baseball situation, but they've added a bunch of teams as well. And so I could go on, but to me, that's the big issue. Wanted to do a quick reaction to these two embarrassing blowouts. And what I want to do now, I want to get to some of your comments and some of your questions. Let's see here. Let's get to some of your questions and your comments. So we got Ryan says SMU is stinky. Yeah, they kind of are. They sucked, man. I'm sorry. Like, I actually just felt bad for Kevin Jennings at a certain point. He just wasn't built for that moment. But listen, again, you can sit here and say, I saw Jackson Dart in the biggest game throw 4 interceptions. Okay. Like, you can't tell me that it's definitive that any of those teams could have gone to Happy Valley today and definitively won. By the way, Miami couldn't stop anybody. I'm sorry. Maybe get a third down stop and you can start complaining about not being in the playoff. Ole Miss, don't lose at home to Kentucky. I don't want to hear it. Dan Rivera, who's always been a great supporter of the show, said, made it to a live show, AT. We appreciate you, Dan. By the way, we will still do a full live show probably Sunday morning because not unfortunately, but I got family commitments in the evening time. Producer Matt is on vacation. Let's see. Listen, you're like me, brother. Phil says, I think it was maybe Philly Girl says, checked out at 28-3 and kept flipping the channels. You and me both. Ben says, I was thinking the same thing. They are biased against the SEC. This is my problem with the SEC. The SEC already gets the benefit of every doubt. And maybe it's because they do have the best teams. And maybe it will be settled. But let's remember, the SEC champion did not play for a national championship last year, okay? And so I only bring it up to very simply say that when I look at this situation, the SEC already has all the advantages. 1, they only play 8 conference games, okay? 2, there's this inherent bias that the league is actually better. And I think this year there were certainly moments where the league was awesome, but let's also not forget LSU lost to USC early in the season. I'm trying to think what was the other couple big upsets. Texas A&M lost to Notre Dame. Arkansas lost to Oklahoma. The league is good, but the league's not perfect, and it already gets all the benefit of the doubt. They play fewer league games. Although, by the way, here's the other thing nobody wants to talk about. All those teams were in when they were 10-2. Like Ole Miss and Alabama were in the driver's seat. And then Alabama got punked by Oklahoma, which, by the way, I saw some revision. Well, Oklahoma was a different team by the end of the year. No, they weren't. They lost 4 of their last 5 games to FBS opponents. The only team they beat was Alabama. By the way, week before Oklahoma beats Alabama, a couple weeks before they get destroyed by South Carolina. They get destroyed by Ole Miss. They get destroyed by LSU a week after they beat Oklahoma. So don't give me this revisionist history crap. Ole Miss, all you had to do was go to Florida and beat Florida, or early in the year, don't lose to Kentucky at home. So I could go on and on, but they already get the benefit of the doubt now because these teams aren't playing well. By the way, here's the other thing. Ranked teams lose to other ranked teams on the road all the time. Like, it's really hard to win on the road in college football. I don't think enough people think about that and realize that. By the way, speaking of which, if you're not subscribed to the show, what are you doing? Make sure to subscribe to the Aaron Torres Pod YouTube channel. Great live audience. We appreciate your support. If you're just joining us, we went live after that SMU game to do some quick, immediate reaction. Make sure you listen because I think I brought up a lot of good points that a lot of people aren't going to talk about. This isn't just an SMU issue. It's a how do we pick the field issue. Are we going to reward teams or punish teams for being in conference championships or not? Because once we decided not to punish teams, you have to put SMU in. Just like you left Texas as the top at-large team when there's nothing on their resume that says Texas should be the top at-large team. So we have to think bigger picture. How are we going to evaluate teams? And I think it sets up a very interesting scenario. Let's see here. People want to laugh. All right. Bama Girl says that people want to laugh at us for saying the SEC is the best conference. There will be at least one SEC team playing for the Natty. I mean, listen, Georgia's obviously going to be playing Notre Dame. We'll see. Obviously, we don't know what Georgia's situation is. Texas got themselves a nice little draw. Clemson at home, Arizona State. Where is that game? In New Orleans next week, I think it is. So I just bring it up because Texas, or I think it's Miami. I can't remember. Anyway, Texas got themselves a nice little draw. That's the point I'm trying to make. This person, William, says proves 12-team guarantees blowouts. Totally agree. Totally freaking agree. We had blowouts in the 14 playoff era. It happens. Ooh, once was lost. Speaking my language, says Texas is going to get upset 34-20 today. We will see. We will see. All I'll say, you better believe that Peter Burns tweet of, oh, this is who SMU played. This is who Indiana played. If Texas loses, you better freaking believe that Torres is going to go nuclear and going to have some stuff to say about Texas' schedule. Because listen, I think there's an argument. I said this on the day of the bracket. I said there's absolutely an argument that South Carolina and Alabama should be in. But if you're going to leave out SMU, there's nothing on Texas's resume besides, oh, they're Texas, that says that Texas should be in. So that would be freaking hysterical. Jeremiah got in a bunch of questions here. Georgia, hello. I don't even know what that means. Ryan says Vandy would beat SMU. Vandy, by the way, let's never forget, 1 loss to Georgia State. 2, they lost 4 of their final 5. The only win was at Auburn, so let's pump the brakes there. I will say Kevin Jennings, the moment was just too big for him. You feel bad for him. Here we go. This is a great comment. Justin says, so far 2 playoff teams are out after going combined 0-5 against ranked teams. Well, what makes that interesting? Texas was 0-2 against ranked teams. Let's see how they do. Clemson, unless you can criticize Clemson. I don't know if Clemson is good or not. Can't argue they didn't play a tougher schedule. Clemson played Georgia on a neutral. Georgia, they played at South Carolina. And then, of course, they played SMU in the conference championship. So Clemson played 3 ranked teams. They only beat 1 of them, but they did play 3. So we'll see. All right. The SEC conference schedule is brutal. Okay, but where does the line of delineation come in? Because at a certain point, the schedule may be brutal, but you can't sell that when Alabama is losing. All they got to do is beat Oklahoma and Auburn, and they're in the college football playoff. They could not do that. It's not SMU's fault. It's not Indiana's fault. It just isn't, okay? Let's see here. Dude is absolutely allergic to saying. All right, so Justin says, dude is absolutely allergic to mentioning Bama beat 3 ranked teams more than SMU and Indiana combined. It's not that I'm not acknowledging that. What I'm saying is, and this is what I said, by the way. And let me say this, Justin. Justin, you're a smart guy, and I think I'm a smart guy. And what pissed me off about ESPN's coverage on that Selection Sunday is this, and we talked about it on this show, and I'm the only person in the world that acknowledged it. The committee had 2 choices, right? There's the angel and the devil on your shoulder. And the angel and the devil, or maybe it's the angel and the angel, the devil and the devil. The committee had a decision. We can reward teams that have very good wins, but very bad losses. So that would be an Ole Miss. That would be an Alabama. Alabama, of course, lost to Vandy and Oklahoma. Ole Miss lost to Kentucky. They can do that, or we can reward teams that have no great wins, but no bad losses. That was SMU. It was also Indiana. It was also Texas. And so the committee decided that they were not going to punish teams that had no bad losses and instead punish the teams like Alabama, like an Ole Miss that do have bad losses. We can argue if it was right or wrong, but what you can't argue is the committee wasn't consistent. At least they were consistent on this issue. And so, yes, Alabama has some really good wins, better wins than Indiana, better wins than SMU, better wins, by the way, than Texas. Nobody is arguing that. What we are arguing is that the committee decided that great wins are good, but bad wins are more detrimental to your resume. It's not right or wrong. It's just what the committee decided. So I'm not saying you're wrong, Justin. I'm not trying to not acknowledge it. What I'm just saying is that this is what the committee decided, and it's not up to me, but based on the decisions that they made, this is what they were going to do. This is what they decided to do. Let's get to a couple more questions before we go. All right, let's see. Let's see here. Justin says it's all just rage bait for views. It's not rage bait for views. It's honesty. Honesty hurts. I'm sorry. Don't lose to Oklahoma. Don't lose to Vandy. I don't know what to tell you, man. All right. Okay. Charles says, you sound crazy saying Alabama wouldn't have played better. Stop the stupidity. The same Alabama team that rushed for 2.2 yards per carry against Oklahoma, the same Alabama team that threw for 5.3 yards per completion against Oklahoma would have definitively played better at Penn State. Now, I don't think Jalen Milroe would have thrown the ball away 3 times, but you can't say that. I think they would have. I think you think they would have, Charles. I'm not disagreeing that we think they would have, but Alabama wasn't this infallible team. Alabama had flaws, just like SMU had flaws, just like Indiana had flaws, just like, let's say it together, Texas had flaws. And so once you decide to put in 12 teams in a playoff bracket, you are going to get teams with flaws. And so you have to decide which flawed teams you like more than others. And the committee decided that they like Indiana more than SMU. Got an angry crowd today. Here you go. Yes, they got it wrong. Indiana didn't beat anybody significant, says Kevin. Neither did Texas. DEI. That does crack me up, George. I like that. Let's see here. Could be interesting. Bama fans saying they would have done better against Penn State don't know. By their rationale, Penn State is way better than Oklahoma or Vandy. Well, Penn State is better than Oklahoma or Vandy, which is the problem. They didn't beat Vandy. They didn't beat Oklahoma. Now, Alabama fans will remind you, they did beat Georgia. Listen, Alabama's best was pretty much as good as anybody, right? By the way, what is going on in this Chiefs game? I have it on in the other room, and every time I pipe down, I hear people yelling and screaming. All right, so I'm going to get out of here in a minute because I want to get to this next game. But like this notion that we're definitive that Alabama would have done better. Why? Because their jersey says Alabama. All they had to do was beat Oklahoma and beat Auburn, and they were going to the college football playoff. They couldn't do it. So if you can't beat Oklahoma on the road, I'm sorry. There's no promise that you're going to, handle yourself well against Penn State. Jack says the expanded playoff is a joke. I don't disagree. I think with the conference championship games serving as de facto playoff games, I think we're going to look back and say that was kind of probably the perfect system. Because last year, if you just factor in that basically the conference championship games, maybe even rivalry weekend were playoffs, well, then all of a sudden, Georgia-Alabama becomes a playoff game. If you look at that as a playoff game, you're like, oh, that was pretty awesome. Washington-Oregon was a playoff game. This year, conference championship games, they might as well have been exhibitions. And that's where the one thing I will say, we're doing this all in real time. I think 12 is too much, but if we have 12, just get rid of the conference championship games. The players don't mean anything. Even Kirby Smart was like the juice in the Georgia or in the Mercedes-Benz was not the same as it's been in previous years. There were a lot of empty seats. You could get into the Big Ten championship game for like $15. Everybody's saving to travel for the playoff. It is what it is. All right, we're going to get out of here. All right, here we go. This is a great comment. Live in and grew up in Alabama, cheering for Alabama. We took ourselves out with those losses, not arguing that, but for anyone who say SMU Boise was better than several SEC teams, it's just lying. I never said they're better. I'm just saying you can't definitively say that they would have played better based on what we saw this year. They're better, but listen, they were the best team in the country. If you go on the ratings, the blue chip ratings, most 5 stars, most 4 stars, they're the most talented roster in college football. By the way, who do we all agree is the most talented roster in college football? Ohio State. They just lost to Michigan the other day. So it is what it is. Andrew, this is great. You praise the SEC every season in basketball, yet you hate the SEC in football. Why? I don't hate the SEC in football. I think it's the best league. I think when you only have 12 spots, though, you can't just make 8 of them for the SEC. I'm sorry, you can't. Because, again, the SEC already gets the benefit of the doubt with everything else. If it was a 10-2 Alabama versus an 11-2 SMU, Alabama would have gotten in. But at some point, losses do have to count. Like, if Alabama beats Oklahoma, they are in this playoff, and SMU is not. If Ole Miss just beats Kentucky, they are in this playoff, and Indiana is not. I'm bashing the SEC. What I'm saying is at some point, some degree of losses have to matter. Okay, let's put in 3 losses. Well, why don't we just put in 4 loss teams? LSU, they weren't terrible. Missouri, what'd they go? 9-3. We got to put them in. It's like at some point we got to acknowledge, like, losses have to matter. Okay. Oh, my God. P-Man, I love you. He says bad losses. Losing to Oklahoma and Kentucky are not bad losses. Kentucky went 1-7 in the SEC. It's a freaking terrible loss. I'm sorry. That is an embarrassingly bad loss. Lane Kiffin. Is this Lane Kiffin's burner account? Gotta go. All right, I'm getting annoyed by you people. I love you all, but I appreciate you listening. But Miami is better than Indiana or SMU. But in the end, listen, Miami fan, most rational person in this chat. We're gonna get out of here because I want to go watch the Texas game. Miami is better than Indiana or SMU, but in the end, you have to win games. And Miami lost 2 of their last 3. I think Miami fans understand. Don't lose to Syracuse. Don't lose to Georgia Tech. And listen, all I'll say is I would have had no problem if the committee, and this is, again, I'll wrap up by saying what I said to start. If the committee hadn't been dumb enough to say that conference championship games can't hurt you and that there's nothing you can do to improve your resume on the final weekend, then I would have no problem. My only point is if you include SMU, if you include Texas, you have to include SMU as well. It's the exact same resume. 11-2, 0-2 against top 25 teams. It's the same thing. All right, I'll tell you what. I'm going to get out of here. I'm going to go. I appreciate the awesome live crowd here, and I'm sorry that sorry if y'all disagree. I love y'all. And by the way, listen, this is very nice. What is this? YAHS says Aaron is one of the best analysts on the internet. Give him a break. Let's be mature. Listen, one thing I will say, and the one thing I will say, I appreciate that, but I appreciate all of you. And it's okay to disagree. And it's okay to disagree with me. One thing you can say about Torres, you can fight Torres. You can tell me I'm dumb as rocks. But one thing you'll say about me, when I come on here, if you disagree with me, I'm going to at least make an argument that I hope makes you think. And that's all I'm trying to do. I'm not trying to say that Alabama definitively should have been out. I'm saying based on what the committee decided weeks before the bracket was even revealed, they put themselves in a box and left themselves no choice. So it's not, don't blame Torres, blame the committee. It is what it is. I also think 12 is too many. I don't, Alabama, okay, cool. Alabama's not, this is the worst Alabama team we've had in 15 years. Like, am I supposed to, shed tears because the worst Alabama team in 15 years didn't get into a bracket after they lost to 2 unranked opponents? So tell you what, it is time for me to get out of here. Appreciate everybody's support. If you are not subscribed, please make sure to do so. Apple, Spotify, Amazon Music, wherever you get your podcasts. Make sure to rate and review the show. I'll be back Sunday morning. We'll do some more reaction to this. This was fun. Appreciate everybody's support. And we'll have 2 more games to talk about with Clemson, Texas, and, of course, the big one, Ohio State. If Ohio State loses tonight, I might not sleep. If Ohio State loses tonight, I might not sleep because my Ryan Day content is going to be fire. Appreciate everybody's support. Subscribe, rate, review. See y'all soon.